Welcome to the Battle for Two Mosque in London, the biggest mosque in Western Europe, for the 13th National Peace Symposium organised by the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, United Kingdom. The symposium was started over a decade ago to promote a deeper understanding of Islam and other faiths and to inspire a mutual effort for lasting peace. More than 1,000 people attend this unique event every year, including secretaries of state, ministers, ambassadors, journalists and academics, as well as representatives from numerous charities and faith communities. Peace is a word that, although small in size, is profound in importance. But for peace to flourish within society, it needs a foundation that is built on true justice. And justice is the theme of this evening's event, the highlight of which will be the keynote address delivered by the head of the worldwide Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih V, may Allah be his helper, who will inshallah be gracing this event with his presence. Amidst a backdrop of political instability and religious fanaticism that is tarnishing our fragile world, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is taking the lead in interfaith dialogue through events such as tonight's, which bring together people from all levels of society to promote peace. This is truly a much needed and unique event, and on behalf of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community United Kingdom, we welcome you to the 13th National Peace Symposium 2016, held at the Battle for Two Mosque in London.
Yes, please be seated.
Assalamu alaikum. With peace and blessings of Allah be upon you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 13th National Peace Symposium of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community. We start our formal program with the recitation of the Holy Quran in Arabic by Nasser Ahmed Arshad, followed by its translation in English by Ahmed Nuruddin Jangir Khan.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم وميثاقه الذي واثقكم به إذ قلتم سمعنا وأطعنا واتقوا الله إن الله عليم بذات الصدور. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. وعد الله الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لهم مغفرة وأجر عظيم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The verses recited before you have been taken from the Holy Quran, chapter 5, verses 8 to 10. The English translation is as follows. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful. And remember Allah's favor upon you and the covenant which He made with you when you said, we hear and we obey. And fear Allah. Surely Allah knows well what is in the minds. O ye who believe, be steadfast in the cause of Allah, bearing witness in equity. And let not a people's enmity incite you to act otherwise than with justice. Be always just, that is nearer to righteousness. And fear Allah, surely Allah is aware of what you do. Allah has promised those who believe and do good deeds that they shall have forgiveness and a great reward.
Thank you. I now invite our National President, Mr. Rafiq Hayat, to give the welcome address.
Your Holiness, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah be your helper. Your Excellencies, the respected parliamentarians, guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May peace and blessings of Allah be upon you. I'd like to welcome you to the 13th Annual Peace Conference, which this year is being held on the theme of justice, the foundation of lasting peace. Today, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is led by the global spiritual leader, and it is our distinct honor that tonight His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad is with us and will deliver the keynote address this evening. In his speeches in parliaments and other fora across the world, His Holiness has repeatedly urged mankind to focus on unity as opposed to division and stressed the need to work together to eradicate every form of extremism and terrorism. He has also called upon international communities to work on the principle of absolute justice so that they have equal opportunities to live in peace, to work for the cause of peace. Indeed, it is under His Holiness' wise leadership that the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has instigated a global campaign for peace. In the UK alone, this included an outreach program that has already reached more than 5 million households in person. We are delighted that you all have chosen to be with us tonight and would like to extend a warm welcome to all present. If only everyone had the same desire to learn, increasing understanding, and sincere efforts for peace, then I'm sure that the world would be a much more harmonious place. We thank you and hope that evening provides food for thought and brings all of us closer for the sake of peace. Allah bless you all. Thank you once again.
Thank you. We have a number of guest speakers with us this evening, and before I introduce the first guest speaker, we also have a special message from the Vatican from Cardinal Peter Turkson. I will just read a few lines of that. Cardinal Turkson says, "On behalf of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, I welcome the opportunity to offer this prayerful greeting to the Ahmadiyya Muslim community on the occasion of the National Peace Symposium dedicated to the important theme, Justice, the Foundation for Lasting Peace. Such dialogue is a necessary condition for peace in the world, and so it becomes our happy duty, and we gladly embrace every opportunity. I note from your literature that you promote public education about peace. With Pope Francis, I commend you for actively taking on this responsibility and for your efforts to favour justice, promote reconciliation, and build peace." That's from Cardinal Peter Turkson. Our first guest speaker is a long-standing friend of the community, Siobhan McDonough MP. Siobhan was elected as Member of Parliament for Mitcham and Morden in 1997 and is also the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and has hosted a special debate recently in Parliament on human rights in Pakistan. She is a good friend of the community and I invite her to say a few words. Siobhan McDonough.
It's a great pleasure to be invited to introduce today's symposium, which continues to go from strength to strength after many years. I welcome His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmed to Merton as an internationally respected voice of peace. In my limited time, I would like to pay tribute to an individual who dedicated his life to serving the cause of peace, a former winner of the prestigious Peace Prize we are celebrating today. Lord Avebury sadly passed away earlier this year after a life dedicating to the protection of human rights of religious and ethnic minorities throughout the world. His loss is felt greatly, and his life of fighting injustice is a model to us all. And I crave your indulgence in remembering a great friend of mine and colleague, and a great friend of the Ahmadiyya community and of Baitul Futu Mosque in particular. Councillor Maxie Martin cannot be with us tonight because she is unwell. It is the first peace symposium that she has ever missed, and it would be a great comfort to her if I could tell her that you will remember her in your thoughts and prayers. I'm so proud that the Borough of Merton is the UK and worldwide headquarters of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, which makes an incredible contribution to the richness and diversity of our community. It is a community that contributes greatly to this country, and your belief in peace and religious tolerance is an example to us all, as you would expect from a community whose motto is love for all, hatred for none. And I'm very proud to chair the All-Party Parliamentary Group for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community to make my small contribution to the vital aim of justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Siobhan. Our next guest speaker is Zach Goldsmith MP. Zach is a Conservative politician and a journalist who has since 2010 represented Richmond Park. He is a passionate campaigner for the environment and a good friend of the community. Zach, alongside Sadiq Khan and Caroline Pidgeon and others, is also a candidate for the 2016 London mayoral election. I'm delighted to invite him to the stage and to invite him to say a few words. Zach Goldsmith.
Your Holiness, members of the congregation, I want to thank you for inviting me to this magnificent occasion. I've never left this mosque yet without a feeling of deep inspiration and also positivity, even after the fire that affected very badly this mosque just at the end of last year. And I want to thank Stephen Hammond, a very good friend of mine and a local MP, your local MP. He's been a loyal friend of this mosque in Parliament, working hard, always across party lines, to make sure that you have a voice at the highest levels of government. And today, more than ever, that voice is needed. It must be heard. London is one of the most diverse cities on earth. 8.5 million people, 300 languages, and the whole world effectively walks the streets of our great city. People make their lives here because of the freedom we offer to be who you want to be. Love for all, hatred for none. It is an ideal this community holds dear, but really it should be a motto for the whole of Greater London. And many of you here in this hall know from personal direct experience the scale of the challenge that we are up against. For over a century, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has taken a stand against hatred, but you have faced it down with compassion and with love and with practical help to bring communities together. Every day you put those values into practice, from the young Ahmadiyya Muslims who every autumn go on the streets of London and sell poppies for the Royal British Legion, to Lord Ahmed, my very good friend here, who serves this country as a Minister of the Crown, working day in, day out at the Home Office to tackle the scourge of extremism. But there is one image for me which sums up what the Ahmadiyya are all about, and it's the red double-decker bus emblazoned with the words "United Against Extremism," an iconic symbol of London carrying a universal message of peace and solidarity. Now, if I'm lucky enough to be elected on May the 5th as Mayor of London, I look forward to working very closely with this community, and more importantly, I look forward to learning from this community. Thank you very much for inviting me here today.
Thank you very much, Zach Goldsmith. Our next speaker is the Right Honourable Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon. Lord Ahmed has served as Government Whip and Lord Spokesperson in the House of Lords. In 2012, he was appointed by the Royal Household as a Lord-in-Waiting to Her Majesty the Queen, becoming the first ever Muslim to hold that post. From 2014 to 2015, he served as Government Minister for Communities, and currently he is serving as Government Minister for Countering Extremism and as Minister for Transport. I invite Lord Ahmed to the stage to say a few words. Lord Ahmed.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, gracious, most merciful, beloved Hazur, respected guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good evening. It's an immense pleasure and privilege for me to address this august gathering once again, and I do so as the Minister responsible for countering extremism, the challenge we face, which is both domestic and indeed international. But there can be no better example than that exemplified by the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, and indeed that under the divine and inspirational leadership of His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, who not just confront and counter extremism, not just by words but by actions, not just domestically but internationally, a living, walking example of how a Muslim community, a true Muslim community guided by God with a Khalifa at the helm, a Khalifa guided by God, the Khalifa of Islam, who inspires not just his own community but people around the world. Indeed, as we've heard, His Holiness has addressed many parliamentarians, and I'm delighted I'm joined by colleagues from across the political spectrum today, but in particular by my colleagues within government, those who are serving, such as Justine Greening, such as Jane, such as Paul Scully, and others who are serving and raising the voice of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in the justice and the inspiration that you provide. Equally, I'm also delighted we're joined by the former Attorney General today, Dominic Grieve, who also has been a good friend of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. All of us stand by the community. I perhaps have a personal connection because I am of the community. but that also instills in me that desire to serve humanity, an example which is inspired by Our Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we are here not just to listen today, but also to learn. But it's a delight and honor to be with you once again.
Thank you, Lord Ahmed. Before I introduce our last guest speaker, I would just like to acknowledge a number of guests who are with us tonight. Councillor Stephen Alambrisis, who's the leader of Merton Council, Jean Lambert, member of the European Parliament, Jane Ellison, who's the Minister for Public Health, Julie Ward, member of European Parliament, the Right Honourable Dominic Grieve, the former Attorney General, Paul Scully, member of Parliament, and also Vice Chair of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Parliamentary Group, and Stephen Hammond. And we have a number of countries represented from across the world, around 30 countries in attendance today, and we thank them for their support. Our last guest speaker is the Right Honourable Justine Greening MP. She's a very good friend of the community and has served as Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Secretary of State for Transport, and since 2012 has been serving as Secretary of State for International Development. Justine is a powerful advocate for humanitarian causes, and we welcome her to the event, and I invite her to say a few words. Justine Greening.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening, everyone, and it's a real privilege to be able to join all of you and so many distinguished guests along with His Holiness for tonight's event. Perhaps if I can just briefly give you my reflection on some of the comments that have already been made as Secretary of State for International Development. Rafiq Hayat talked about the numbers of people who are displaced in this world. We've actually got a record number of people now who rely on humanitarian support just to literally be able to stay alive. It's 125 million people. And the problem that they face is it's really the size of a country, but they don't have a head of state. And so when I go to the United Nations, like I did on Monday this week, there isn't that head of state there to talk about what their issues are and to make sure that their children are in school, that they have the kind of health that they need. That's left to the rest of us to make sure that that happens. And I'm very proud that our country is one of those that does play a key role in making sure that people around the world who need help, whether they're affected by the Syria crisis or whether they're in places where the cameras often aren't, whether it's Sudan or Central African Republic, that we're one of those countries who's there tirelessly working away. And I say the word country because although I'm obviously very involved in what the UK government's doing, actually, one of the things I've been proudest of in this role is to meet the many, many British people and British charities that are working alongside the Department for International Development to help provide support to the people that we work for. Many of them do it with funding from DFID, but actually we wouldn't be able to do the work that we do without UK charities like Save the Children, like Mary's Meals, and so many others. But one of those, of course, is Humanity First. And another one, of course, is the Ahmadiyya Muslim Youth Association. And both of these elements of the community play their own important role in helping to rise to the challenge that these massive numbers of people who need so much support to stay alive provoke for the entire world. So I just want to say how proud I am to be able to play a role in representing the community as a local MP, but also to say that in my broader role within government, it's a privilege to be able to work alongside Humanity First and to see the fantastic fundraising that the Youth Association does to enable Humanity First to do so much work. So thank you very much, and I hope we have an enjoyable evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Justine. And I should have also acknowledged Baroness Shaz Sheehan, who's with us tonight as well. It now gives me great pleasure to welcome the keynote speaker for this evening, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, head of the worldwide Ahmadiyya Muslim community.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, gracious, ever merciful. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessing of Allah be upon you all. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to all of our distinguished guests who have accepted our invitation and joined us this evening. Your attendance is particularly noteworthy given that this event is taking place at a time when widespread fear of Islam is on the increase due to the horrific and disgraceful acts of terrorist groups. For example, last November, the world watched in horror when the terrorist attacks took place in Paris. And apart from this, there have been suicide bombing and attacks in various countries at regular intervals. In terms of the United Kingdom, very recently, the Assistant Commissioner of Police warned that Daesh was planning enormous and spectacular terrorist attacks here in the UK, targeting high-profile and public places. Furthermore, there has been a sudden influx of refugees into Europe during the past year, and this is causing a degree of fear, uncertainty, and even panic in the minds of many people. In light of all of this, your attendance and willingness as non-Muslims to attend an event organized by a Muslim community proves that you are courageous, tolerant, and open-hearted people. Nonetheless, the simple truth is that there is no need for anyone to fear true Islam. While some people claim Islam to be a religion of extremism and one that promotes suicide attacks or other forms of terrorism, nothing could be further from the truth. Recently, a well-known English columnist wrote about the rise of Islamophobia in a national newspaper. He wrote that he had done extensive research on suicide bombings and found that the first such attack took place in the 1980s, despite the fact that Islam had existed for well over 300 years. He concluded that if Islam permitted or encouraged such attacks, then they ought to have occurred from the outset of Islam and throughout its history. His point was valid and very well made and proved that such attacks were a modern-day evil, far removed from the true and peaceful teachings of Islam. Certainly, Islam has very clearly prohibited all forms of suicide, and so there is no justification whatsoever for suicide attacks or any other forms of terrorism. Such heinous acts lead to the murder and barbaric slaughter of innocent women, children, and other members of the public. A recent research article of Dr. Considine of Rice University in Houston, Texas, clearly says that the persecution of Christians in the so-called Islamic State is not justified by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him's writings. It further states that the Prophet's vision of a Muslim nation was one of religious pluralism and civil rights. Thus, let it be clear that such acts are absolutely contrary to Islamic teachings. If Islam has ever permitted warfare, it is only to the extent of a defensive war, where war has been forced upon you. For example, in chapter 22, verse 40 of the Holy Quran, Allah the Almighty has said that permission for warfare is given to those people whom war has been forcibly imposed. In that same verse, Allah the Almighty said that in the case of religious warfare, He would help and support those who had been wronged. In early Islam, the wars that took place were genuine religious wars, fought for the sake of upholding the fundamental principle of universal religious freedom. History proves that the wars fought with this intention made Muslims victorious, regardless of the fact that a handful of unequipped Muslims fought against huge, well-equipped armies. However, as a Muslim, when I analyze the wars involving Muslims today, I am certain that they cannot be classed as religious wars. For one, most of the disputes in the Muslim world are either internal civil strife or with the neighboring Muslim countries. Secondly, if ever non-Muslim countries are involved, they have never declared the war as a religious, and rather help both sides of Muslims. Thus, present-day wars are not being fought for the sake of Islam or for the sake of religion, but are for economic or geopolitical gains, and are proving only a means of defaming Islam's name. And so, based upon what I have just said, I hope it is now clear that there is no need to fear Islam, and that it is not a religion of extremism or one that permits suicide attacks or indiscriminate violence. There is no need for Islamophobia, because Islam's true teachings are of peace, tolerance, and mutual respect. Islam's teachings are of upholding human values and protecting the honor, dignity, and freedom of all people. However, of course, we are all well aware that there are some extremists and so-called Islamic groups that are perpetrating the very worst forms of brutality in the name of Islam. Nevertheless, the verse of the Quran I quoted earlier makes it clear that such acts are not permitted or justified in any shape or form by Islam. Another significant matter, which instead of leading me as a Muslim towards warfare and violence, leads me towards exhibiting love for all of humanity, is the fact that in the second verse of the very first chapter of the Holy Quran, it is stated that Allah the Almighty is the provider and sustainer of all the worlds. And the third verse states that He is gracious and ever merciful. Thus, when Allah the Almighty is the provider and sustainer of all the people, and gracious and ever merciful, how could it be that He desired for those who believed in Him to mercilessly murder, violently oppose, or harm His creation in any way? Of course, the answer is that it is not possible. Nonetheless, Allah the Almighty has certainly permitted for action to be taken to stop cruelty, inhumanity, and injustice. Islam states that a Muslim should seek to stop the hand of an oppressor and to end all forms of injustice and transgression. According to Islam, there are two ways in which this can be achieved. Firstly, it is far better if peace can be attained through mutual dialogue, negotiations, and diplomacy. However, where this is not possible, only then force may be used in order to stop wrongdoing. with the intention of establishing sustainable peace. Outside of the religious context, in every society and nation, there are rules and laws that exist, and if they are violated, then punitive action is normally taken. If it is possible to reform without punishment or with just a mild sanction or reprimand, that is better. However, if that is not possible, then severe punishment is duly discharged for the benefit of the wider society and as a means of deterrent to others. Moving to a religious context, according to Islam, punishment or sanction is permitted not as a means of revenge or retribution, but only as a means of ending cruelty or persecution and as a means of positive reformation. The Holy Quran has said that if a person or group can be rehabilitated through forgiveness and mercy, then this method should be adopted. However, if clemency or forbearance does not prove effective, then punishment should be administered as a means of reformation and improvement. Therefore, the philosophy underpinning punishment in Islam is extremely far-sighted and quite unique. Its purpose is to reform, rehabilitate, and improve. It is to develop the highest standards of human values amongst mankind so that by adopting the attributes of their Creator, all people come to respect and care for one another. Therefore, where the rights of an individual or group are unjustly usurped, Islam permits punishments that are proportionate to the crime. However, it remains the case that if reformation can be achieved without sanction, it is preferable. This is why Allah the Almighty has said in chapter 24, verse 23 of the Holy Quran that it is better to forgive and to manifest forbearance. Similarly, in chapter 3, verse 135, Allah the Almighty has said that those who suppress their anger and who forgive and forget are those whom Allah loves and prefers. Furthermore, at many other places in the Holy Quran, it is stated that the person should forgive wherever possible, because the ultimate purpose is always moral reformation rather than vengeance. In terms of conflict between nations or groups, Allah the Almighty has given golden principle for the establishment of long-lasting peace in chapter 49, verse 10 of the Holy Quran. In the verse, it states that if there is a dispute between nations or groups, third parties should seek to mediate and to bring about a peaceful resolution to the conflict. In the event of an agreement, all parties should act equitably. But if either party contravenes the settlement and takes aggressive measures, then the other nations or groups should unite together and even use force, if necessary, to stop the aggressor. However, once the aggressive party withdraws and adopts peace, they should not be unduly restricted, but should be permitted to move forward as an independent nation and a free society. Therefore, the provider and sustainer of all of mankind, Allah the Almighty, desires for all people to live together in peace and to be free from all forms of persecution and injustice. In terms of belief, Islam enshrines the principles of universal religious freedom and freedom of conscience. According to Islam, every person not only has the right of freedom of belief, but also has the right to peacefully propagate their beliefs. Faith is and always will be a matter of the heart, and so there should never be any form of compulsion in religion. Whilst Allah the Almighty has deemed Islam to be a complete teaching, no one has the right to forcefully convert others to it. Anyone, whether religious or not, is free to accept Islam. But the key point is that it should be accepted freely and entirely of one's own volition and choice. Similarly, if a Muslim decides that he wishes to leave Islam, then, according to the teachings of the Quran, he or she has the right to do so. Whilst we believe Islam is to be a universal religion and a timeless teaching, if anyone chooses to leave it, then that is their choice and prerogative. In chapter 5, verse 55, Allah says that if anyone wants to leave, let them go. He will replace with better and sincere ones. No government, group, or individual has a right to punish them or sanction them in any way. Thus, the allegation that Islam mandates punishment for apostasy is entirely unjust and without foundation. Therefore, the teachings of Islam all revolve around Allah and His being and the fact that He is the sustainer and provider for entire universe. Consequently, if a Muslim seeks to inflict merciless cruelties or to indulge in any forms of extremism, then they will have to reject God's attribute of being the sustainer of all of the mankind. Alternatively, it may be that certain Muslims accept Allah to be the master of the universe and the sustainer of all of the worlds, but have not truly comprehended the meaning of this and have consequently moved far away from Islam's original teachings. Hence, it was to enlighten and educate mankind of the true Islam that we Ahmadiyya Muslims believe that Allah the Almighty sent the founder of our community as the promised Messiah and reformer of the age. He informed us that the era of religious warfare had come to an end, and that God Almighty desired for mankind to live in peace and to fulfill the rights of their Creator and of one another. Addressing his followers about this, the promised Messiah, al-Islam, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, once said, according to the true spirit of the teachings of Islam, there are only two parts of the religion. Or it can be said that the religion is based upon two paramount objectives. First of all is to recognize the one God with absolute certainty and to sincerely love Him and to submerge yourself entirely in His obedience as per the demands of love and submission. The second purpose is to serve His people and to utilize all of your capabilities and faculties in the loving service of others and to always show sincere gratitude to whoever is kind to you and to favor them in return, whether they be your monarch or ruler, or whether they be the most simple and humble of people, and you should always keep a loving bond with them. Furthermore, the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has also explained the true meaning of chapter 16, verse 91 of the Holy Quran, in which Allah the Almighty states, "Verily, Allah enjoins justice and the doing of good to others and giving like kindred." The founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community states that in this verse, Muslims are commanded by Allah to be just and fair towards all others. Therefore, Muslims are commanded to be kind and to extend favor to all other people, including those who have not been sympathetic to them or favored them in any way. Finally, he explained that the verse required a Muslim to love God's creation to such an extent that they considered every person in the world to be like their own close family member. In fact, he said that the true Muslim should love others irrespective of their background or belief in the same way that a mother loves her child. Certainly, this is the highest and purest form of love, because in terms of this, the second stage, where a person exhibits kindness or favor, it is impossible that an element of self-projection remains, whether covert or overt. And at the same point, the individual may remind the person of their gesture and seek favor in return. However, a mother's love is truly selfless and altruistic, and her unique bond with her child is such that she is willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of her offspring. She desires nothing to return, and nor does she require any form of praise or tribute. Therefore, this is the ultimate standard that Islam advocates, whereby Muslims are taught to love all of humanity as a mother loves her child. These are the true teachings of Islam. Allah the Almighty has said that those who believe in Him should adopt His attributes. And so it is impossible for a true Muslim to be cruel, and it is similarly impossible for Islam to permit any form of injustice, violence, or extremism. Over the years, I have made these points time and time again, and have highlighted these core Islamic teachings. I have repeatedly quoted the Holy Quran to prove that what I am saying is based on Islam's authentic teachings. However, it remains that our peaceful and inclusive message is not covered extensively in the media. Whilst, on the other hand, those relatively few people involved in brutality and carnage are given non-stop worldwide media coverage and attention. There is no doubt that the media plays a huge role in influencing public opinion, and so the media should use this power responsibly, as a force for good and as a force for peace. It should show the world what true Islam represents, rather than focusing on the merciless acts of minority. Publicity is the oxygen sustaining most terrorist or extremist groups. And so I have no doubt that if the media takes on board what I have said, we will soon find that the terrorism and violence afflicting the world will begin to die away. Personally, I cannot comprehend how the extremists who have plagued Islam and violated its noble teachings can seek to justify their hateful acts in its name. Islam's teachings of peace prohibit all forms of extremism to the extent that even in a state of legitimate war, Allah has commanded that any action or punishment should remain proportionate to the crime committed, and that it is better if patience, and forgiveness is manifest. Thus, all those so-called Muslims who are engaged in violence, injustice, and brutality are inviting God's wrath and anger to their doorstep. At a time when fear of Islam is ever increasing, let me stress again that the Holy Quran has repeatedly enjoined love, compassion, and benevolence. If, in certain extreme circumstances, the Quran permitted defensive warfare, it was only in order to establish peace. Today, we observe that the majority of governments or groups, whether Muslims or non-Muslims, involved in warfare are also claim that they are fighting for the sake of establishing peace. In terms of perception, it seems that most people are willing to overlook the wars conducted by certain world powers, or at least not affiliate their actions to any religion or belief. However, as we live in a climate in which Islam's teachings are being targeted, we see that all cruelties or wars carried out by Muslims are immediately linked to the teachings of Islam. Yet the voices of those people and those groups who are earnestly striving to spread Islam's true and peaceful teachings are not being heard and not being widely publicized. In my opinion, this is unjust and extremely counterproductive. At a time of worldwide conflict, we should remember this basic principle that it is better for all forms of evil and cruelty to be suppressed and for all forms of goodness and humanity to be endorsed. In this way, evil will not spread far, whilst virtue and peace will spread far and wide and adorn our society. If we promote the good that is happening in the world, we can overcome those who seek to undermine our cherished values of mercy and humanity. Yet, the world does not seem to have accepted or understood this principle, and that is why the media continues to prioritize its circulation or viewing figures over and beyond the peace of the world. The media, which gladly focuses on the tiny minority involved in brutality, are feeding the propaganda machines of evil groups such as Daesh, yet they fail in their duty to highlight all that is good in the world. This is an injustice that is sowing the seeds of further division and conflict. In terms of world politics and defeating terrorism, it is necessary to accept that establishing peace is our paramount objective. And so, compromise from all sides is required. In case you do not trust the words of a Muslim, let me present to you the views of eminent non-Muslims who are well-versed in political affairs and who desire peace in the world. For example, when speaking about how to defeat extremism, and in particular the terrorist group, Austria's foreign minister recently said, we need a pragmatic approach, including the involvement of President al-Assad in the fight against Islamic State terror. In my opinion, he says, in my opinion, the priority is the fight against terrorism. This is not possible without powers such as Russia and Iran. Further, Professor John Gray, a retired political philosopher who taught for many years at the London School of Economics, recently wrote about the importance of prioritizing peace over the type of political system in place. He wrote, the form of government, democratic, despotic, monarchical, or republican, is less important than the capacity to deliver peace. In my opinion, this was an extremely insightful comment. Yet, the world's major powers have continued to prioritize regime change in countries that were previously relatively stable. For example, the West was determined to remove Saddam from Iraq, and the painful consequences of that war 13 years ago continue to be felt to this day. Another prominent example is Libya, whereby President Gaddafi was forcibly removed from office in 2011, and ever since, Libya has spiraled into a state of lawlessness and unbridled chaos. A direct consequence of the political vacuum in Libya has been that the fact that Daesh has now built a significant base and terror network in the country, which it is continuing to strengthen. The situation is now extremely dangerous, not only for the region, but also for Europe, and this is something that I warned of some years ago. Therefore, the priority in such countries should not be regime change for the sake of it. Rather, it should be to ensure that the members of the public are given their due rights and for long-term peace to be established. Going back to Syria, I agree with the Austrian foreign minister when he says that the overriding objective should be to establish peace. Hence, the major powers should be willing to open the channels of communication with Syria's government and to seek the help of other neighboring countries that have influence in the region. Remember, positive change is only possible if one is willing to set aside their personal interests for the greater good and is willing to act fairly at all times. As I have already said, Islam says that justice is the foundation upon which peace is built. And so we must pay heed to the urgent issues of our time. For many years, I have warned that the world is moving rapidly towards another world war, and now others are reaching the same conclusion. In fact, some prominent people are now saying that they believe that a world war has already begun. Nonetheless, I believe that we still have the time to stop such a war in its tracks. But the solution remains, as I have already said, to act with justice and to leave aside all vested interests. On a number of previous occasions, I have spoken about the critical importance of cutting the funding and supply lines of extremist groups. Yet, it cannot be said that full efforts are being made in this regard. For example, a recent special investigative report published by the Wall Street Journal stated that Daesh was acquiring huge quantities of US dollars from auction being held by Iraq's central bank. Those same dollars were being provided to Iraq directly from the Federal Reserve in the United States. The article stated that the US government had known about this since at least June 2015, but personally, I believe that the world powers knew about such trading for much longer. Furthermore, in terms of the sale of oil, it is well known that different groups and even governments are purchasing oil from Daesh. Why has this trade not been stopped? Why have comprehensive sanctions not been imposed to prevent such deals? If it seems that when it comes acquiring oil, morality goes out of the window. This is a point that was also made by Professor Leif Werner of King's College London in a recent article where he said, "The world tolerates all forms of atrocities for the sake of gaining oil. Thus, countries have bought oil from Daesh and from Sudan, where a lot of human rights abuses have taken place." He says, "This is a violation of proper fundamental market economics, whereby violence should not create property rights. Furthermore, in a recent article, the director of the Iraq Energy Institute explained how Daesh was selling its oil. The authors wrote, crude oil is transported by tankers to Jordan via Amber province, to Iran via Kurdistan, to Turkey via Mosul, to Syria's local market, and to Kurdistan region, and to the Kurdistan region of Iraq, where most of it goes refined locally. Most of it gets refined locally. It defies logic, so that state officials are not complicit in this raid. Therefore, whilst it is claimed that all possible efforts are being made to eradicate terrorism and extremism, the evidence does not substantiate this claim. Given all of this, how can it be said that there is true justice in the world? How can it be claimed that honesty and integrity are considered paramount? Similarly, recently there has been widespread media coverage documenting the global arms trade. According to official reports, last year, the United States exported weapons worth $46.6 billion, which was an increase of more than $12 billion from the previous year. It was further reported that the majority of those weapons were sold to countries in the Middle East, and in turn, they were fueling the wars in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. I reiterate that if such trading is taking place, how is it possible for justice and peace to be established? These few examples I have cited are all in the public domain and are the views of respected analysts and commentators. Until principles of justice are exhibited at all levels of society and between nations, we will not see true peace in the world. Without justice, it could take decades to defeat the evil that is Daesh and other extremist groups. However, if the world heeds this message and comes to manifest justice, and genuine efforts are made to restrict the funding and supply lines of terrorism, then I believe, unlike a retired American military general who recently said the war against Daesh will last between 10 and 20 years, that the network of terrorism tormenting the world can be destroyed imminently. In conclusion, it is my belief that unless the world comes to recognize its Creator and accepts Him as the sustainer of mankind, true justice cannot prevail, and not only will true justice not prevail, but we will also experience a lethal nuclear war whose catastrophic consequences will be faced by our future generations. I pray that the world comes to understand this reality. I pray that we all play our respective roles in furthering the cause of humanity. And I pray that true peace based upon justice is established in all parts of the world. With these words, I would like to once again take the opportunity to thank all of our guests for joining us this evening. May Allah bless you. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, His Holiness will now lead us in silent prayer. We pray by raising our hands. You may join us in any way you feel comfortable.
A silent prayer. Ameen.
Look, the central theme is peace. It is about respecting differences, and it's about different groups living in harmony. It's a message that is universal. It's a message which we need to take on board. We have a troubled world, and that affects every country. And I think this community, in particular, has shown a way to avoid those troubles. It's a community that contributes so much to London's prosperity. It's a community from which I think we can all learn. I'm a relatively regular visitor to the mosque here, and I'm always inspired, and I always feel that this is a great contributor to London's success.
I think it is really important for us to know each other and to break the barriers of unknown. It's when we do not know each other, this is when we cannot maintain peace because we're afraid of other people's points of view. But when we gather like this, openly discussing justice, and fairness, and then I think this is when we grow into each other. As a Christian myself, I found that we have so much in common. We share so much. We have same goals, objectives, peace, prosperity, community life, fair life, love and justice. So much in common. So I was really impressed by the speech.
I heard a lot of speeches, but this was one of the best I ever heard. We should make it known all over the world.
The people outside here must know that Islam is just like any other religion, that it is a positive religion promoting ideals of love, of peace, of positive ways of living, and not just what it's in the news. And I think that's the real core value of tonight, and I really appreciate that the voice of the Khalifa tonight was so loud, that was so strong to promote that message.
I think he is acquiring, with the passage of time, very considerable stature, not just obviously within your own community, but outside of it. And he's done that by tremendous hard work and by constantly repeating some very basic themes about Islam and its interpretation, and how it should be a force for good in society.
Thank you very much for your inspirational talk, and I hope the world listens to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.